No DA, no party, no DA, no problem. Here I want to talk about the difference between active directory engagements in a virtual environment or in an educational environment like Hack the Box or Try Hack Me and in real world. What I meant with my initial sentence. In practice environments, basically, reaching DA is the end goal. Once you do that, you're done. Once you get the flag as administrator, you pound the machine, and that's it. So you get the impression that reaching DA is the ultimate goal of any Active Directory pen test. Nothing could be further from truth. Nothing could be farther from truth than that. In fact, in order to understand this difference, I can mention an example of a real-world engagement I had a look at in a previous report, where the tester had gotten a hash-through responder belonging to the main administrator and got lucky enough to crack it offline through Hashcat so he could get to the A. But this guy probably was inexperienced, so anyway, he wasn't very thorough and didn't do anything other than that. He didn't show any impact because remember, the client isn't so technical, so showing that you reached the main administrator is good, but the client doesn't understand what you can do with that. And what counts at the end of the day is showing impact. If you don't show impact, the client doesn't understand your finding and doesn't care about it. Because in this case, the client could say, okay, you popped the shell, so what? What's the problem here? In my case, sometimes I got the A, sometimes I didn't. But anyway, regardless, I always try to enumerate the hack count of all the network shares I could access and retrieve any sort of confidential information I could extract from them. Oftentimes I could find credentials in clear text stored in an encrypted form on text files or stuff like that. One time I also found a ransomware note, so even if I didn't get the A, the client wasn't very concerned about that, because the information I discovered were more than enough to offset the fact that I didn't get the A. Anyway, if you have a look at a real-world engagement, the statement of work doesn't say that the goal is to get the A, but the goal is to access confidential and sensitive information, which means this is the end goal. To reach that goal, you don't necessarily have to be the A. What matters is that you have a valid set of credentials to the Active Directory environment, which can either discovered through multiple vectors or sometimes can be asked to the client. I normally ask the client for an AD account only as a last resort, because I think it's very important to show impact getting a foothold from zero, rather than have the client create an account for you. On the other hand, if you can get a foothold, you want to demonstrate what an attacker could do with a valid set of credentials, because that allows you to access another huge series of attacks and privilege escalation vectors unavailable otherwise. So this post is mostly to help beginners and junior pen testers with the feeling of being worthless because you didn't get the A. No worries. You don't have to feel bad about that, because this is not the end goal. And especially, don't get frustrated like I did sometimes, and don't launch reckless attacks trying to get the A at all costs, because you can do only damages and compromise the report with the client. So you don't want to do that. It's much better not to have the A, but have solid evidence that you retrieved confidential information that had the A, but at the cost of crashing and taking down the client's network. That should never happen as far as you can prevent it. So that's it. When you hack a real-world network, that's not a CDF. That's a business environment and must be treated as a business environment. So you need to support the client business, not show that you're elite hacker. The client didn't give a shit about that and didn't hire you for this reason. They hire you because you know how to handle this type of penetration tests and you can make the most out of them. That's why they hired you. So this is all that I want to talk about. I think it's an important concept that I don't hear around very often, and it gets to a series of misconceptions that can really hurt security professionals when they started out and began working as a penetration tester. Don't fall for this trap. I had to learn the hard way that getting the A doesn't mean anything. In fact, a certification I think is very valuable and is worth it is CRTP, because they ask you to get remote code execution on the machine, but that doesn't mean getting the main administrator. You can have any form of remote code execution, which is what you do in real world. So you get a foothold and you start enumerating, and that's sometimes more than enough, especially when there are macroscopic misconfigurations that allow you to move laterally and escalate your privilege. Okay, enough for tonight. That was supposed to be a quick video. Bye bye.